They're gonna figure it out. And when they do, those kids are never gonna forgive you.
Some of the most impactful scenes we've seen so far in Season 3 has definitely come from the Tejadas. From Lorenzo saving Kane to Monet having Gordo slice Lorenzo's throat, the Tejadas have definitely been at the center of action in Power Book 2 Ghost. In Episode 6, we followed the immediate aftermath of Lorenzo's death, with the Tejada family meeting, his repast, his funeral, and then Monet coming home to a hallucination of Lorenzo sitting at the head of the family table having a cigar, something she always hated.
You know I can't stand them stinking ass cigars. You're not smoking in here.
I'll smoke what I want in my house.
But if Lorenzo was going to have a cigar in his own home, then he was going to have a cigar. But in this hallucination scene, he definitely let Monet know after what she did, he still loves her, but how the kids are going to figure it out, and when they do, the kids will never forgive her. This is set up to be one of the most powerful hallucination scenes that we've seen so far in Power Book 2 Ghost for a few reasons. It gave Monet a stark reminder that she killed someone that loved her, and would have done anything to protect her, as well as the family, but it was also a direct foreshadow of what's to come for Monet. Each one of these kids will definitely find out what Monet did, and they're not just going to turn on her, I think they're going to go one step further.
It's Monet again. She's always the problem.
Monet's had a stranglehold on these kids since day one, but is it just an illusion? Something that Tariq made reference to in Season 2 was how she thinks she's in control, but she didn't know how each one of these kids were going behind her back. So even though Monet will try and re-establish some level of control, is it too late? Especially because Kane seems to know Monet had something to do with Lorenzo's death, but he's someone who's playing chess and not checkers, and I'm going to come back to this in a bit more detail later on. Now, Monet is someone who kept the Zeke secret for 24 years, the reason why Dante Spears came back to New York, and now the reason why these kids no longer have a father. So just like Rock in Raising Kanan, Monet is definitely the devil of Power Book 2 Ghost, and when her kids figure it out, they're also going to realize she's going to have to go. So in the rest of this video, we're going to be running through the relationship between Monet and Lorenzo, the events that unfolded at his repast and his funeral, how Kane knows 2 + 2 is 4, and definitely not 5, and then we're going to round it off with my own thoughts and theories why Monet deserves 2 and potentially will end up in an orange jumpsuit at the end of Power Book 2 Ghost Season 3. Now, the relationship between Lorenzo and Monet has definitely been a funny one, and it dates back to Season 1. In some ways, I think Monet loved having Lorenzo in prison, because that meant she was able to have some sort of control on the operation on the outside. We also saw how they differed in terms of how they wanted to run the operation. Lorenzo wanted Drew to be the leader, but we saw Monet was nurturing and mentoring Diana, and keeping Kane in check.
You're not a decision maker. What you did with Guap, that's what you do best. That's your lane. Stay in it.
In Season 1, she told him what he does with Guap is what he does best, and he's not so much of a decision maker. Ironically, fast forward to Season 3 for a moment, I think Kane started to prove her wrong. Now, there's also been a trust issue between the two, and that became apparent at the beginning of Season 2. We saw Diana going into prison in tears, and then approaching Davis to help Lorenzo be released, using the money from Monet's bar. But Lorenzo told Diana to keep it between them, and there was a good reason for doing so.
Your mother never shows her hand, Kane. You of all people should know that.
Monet never shows her hand, and if she really wanted to fight to have Lorenzo released, she could have, but the fact is, I think she preferred Lorenzo sitting in prison. So it took Diana stealing the money from the bar and getting help from Davis and Cooper Sachs, which is why Lorenzo always kept his cards really close to his chest when he was going through his release. Now, the power struggle that then followed was always going to end in one way. In Season 2, it definitely had to be Mecca or Lorenzo, and Mecca was the one who caught the bullet, but that meant Lorenzo was always on borrowed time, especially after he accidentally killed Zeke.
You put him in the middle of this life, and you didn't prepare him.
Accountability and responsibility. I think this is something Monet definitely needed to hear, and I know many will point fingers at Diana and other factors, but the truth is, the person who had to take most of the blame was Monet. She brought Zeke into this life when she kept him close, and when she didn't prepare him for the dangers that come with the game. It was inevitable that being associated with the Tejadas and the game would eventually catch up with Zeke, and that's exactly what happened, albeit it was an accident from Lorenzo. But Monet was never going to let this go. She wanted revenge, and she wanted blood from the man who was responsible for Zeke's death. And in the most ruthless kill so far in Power Book 2 Ghost, as Lorenzo stumbled out the bar a little drunk, his neck was sliced by Gordo in front of Zeke's mural. At the repast, we had Kai, who in Episode 1 gave us a hint that he had a thing for Monet, and he not only continued to play on this, but he reminded Kane and Drew they can't let Lorenzo's death go unanswered, they had to seek revenge. But this is the difference between Kane and Drew. Kane definitely wants revenge, don't get it twisted, and he won't let his father's death go unanswered, but he knows very well it wasn't the Russians. In fact, he very well knows Monet had something to do with it.
But you know, Mom, the other day after we talked, it seemed like you might have had some questions for Lorenzo.
In previous seasons, Kane may have been playing checkers, but not anymore. Kane in season 3 is definitely playing chess. He's growing as a person, he's smarter, wiser, making less mistakes, and he's generally just thinking before he makes any moves. And that's the difference between Kane in season 3 compared to seasons 1 and 2, where he would generally shoot first and think later. I think from this conversation, Kane definitely knows. He's smart enough to know that the Russians weren't behind Lorenzo's death, but Monet's threat put him back in line, and she has threatened to kill both Kane and Diana before.
Now, I'm gonna say this once, so hear me good. Run, Kane. Run before I put you down myself.
So if Kane has any inkling Monet was behind Lorenzo's death, he's gonna think twice before he says something, because if she's capable of killing Lorenzo, she really is capable of anything, and that's why she's the devil. Now, what makes the situation even more complicated is who killed Lorenzo, and also who fed the information it was the Russians. Monet asked Drew was it Gordo who told him it was the Russians, but even though it wasn't made explicitly clear it was Gordo who gave him the info, I think it could have been to make it look like he had nothing to do with it. But did Drew make the right call? That's what Monet thinks after Drew and Kane got into a fight after the Russians hit back. Now, from Drew's perspective, I think he felt as if he owed it to Lorenzo, because he was the one who made the call to take the Russians connect. And with the streets talking, it was the Russians. I do get the feeling he may felt a little responsible, but of course, it was always going to be the wrong move. Not only did he hit the wrong crew, Kane and Drew are now in a battle for the throne, with Monet backing Drew saying he made the right call, which wasn't what she said before, but that's not all. The man who actually killed Lorenzo is closer than Drew thinks. Drew is definitely falling for Gordo, the same man who slit Lorenzo's throat, and so looking at each other in the eye, both of them know that they had a hand in Uncle Frank and Lorenzo's death. So Gordo being close to Drew is a big problem for Monet in two ways. The first, which we've just gone through, how he was behind Lorenzo's death, but the second is Monet wanted Drew to take over the Tahad organization, but Drew can't do that if he has distractions, especially from the man who killed Lorenzo, and so this shit is so complicated in so many ways. Monet had Lorenzo killed, Kane knows that something isn't right, there's a battle for the throne, and Monet's backing Drew, but they've started a war with the Russians, which were picked up by the police by the way. Gordo killed Lorenzo, but he's still in bed with Drew, and then it's only a matter of time before the kids find out Monet had a hand in Lorenzo's death. And so where does Diana come into all of this, especially considering she's daddy's girl? Now this is where we come full circle to Lorenzo's hallucination. He warned Monet the kids will figure it out, and when they do, they're never gonna forgive her. But what will they do when they find out? That's the question I think we should be asking. Monet's made a huge mistake, and she's gonna make a further move to re-establish her control. So is it beyond reasonable doubt we could see these kids turn and possibly even realize they need to get rid of Monet? Let's not get it twisted. Monet definitely needs to pay for all the bad shit she's done. But I don't see them killing two parents in one season. Definitely not. But what I do see happening is Monet ending up in an orange jumpsuit come the end of season 3. And I wouldn't be surprised if this was set up by the kids. So with it being inevitable that Drew, Diana and Kane will turn on Monet, who's in a corner, who's the only one that hasn't gone behind her back throughout 3 seasons of Ghost? Tariq St. Patrick. And this is who I think Monet will turn to in a time of need, because the only one she can really trust is Tariq. But then again, trusting Tariq, I don't know if that's a good idea either. We all saw the strategic move he put in play in episode 5 to get rid of Francesco Lombardi, and then again in episode 6 with Obi to get Grandma Estelle to safety. So who really knows what Tariq's got up his sleeve, and how he's going to react when he finds out Monet was behind Lorenzo's death. There's also another question: if Monet does go down, what does that happen with the kids? Will they stick together or will they go their separate ways? I think we could probably make a case where they'll probably do their own thing. So that's a breakdown of Lorenzo's hallucination and how it foreshadows some dark times ahead for Monet to Harder. Kane definitely knows something's not quite right with the Russians attacking Lorenzo, and he's definitely looking in Monet's direction. In the short term, fear might stop him from confronting Monet, but eventually they're going to realize she needs to go. So could we see Monet ending up in an orange jumpsuit come the end of season 3? Could they hand her over to law enforcement, with Tariq St. Patrick being the only one in a corner? Drop all your thoughts down below in the comment section, and as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.